Floor-crossing MPs, election promises shelved, damaging cabinet links, reporting a revolt against the PM.
Are you concerned or frustrated that you were rolled in your own cabinet regarding the religious discrimination bill?
There'll be a time and a place to talk about those issues.
It's been another nightmare week for the government.
The whole week has played out with the kind of horrible inevitability of a David Attenborough doco. Increasingly, the Prime Minister is looking like the slowest wildebeest in the herd.
And today, more trouble in paradise.
He was, frankly, I think, misled.
Peter Dutton accusing the 5 Liberal MPs who voted against the government of lying to the PM.
There were undertakings that were given. The undertaking wasn't honoured.
Which seems a little, what's the word?
Gaslighter, denier.
Given how clear their feelings seemed in the lead-up to the religious discrimination vote.
We just need to be very careful when we do that we don't allow that to come at the expense of other people's rights.
Why on earth would we want to inflict that upon anyone?
Would you cross the floor if the protections are not right for kids?
Let's just say I really hope it doesn't come to that.
No, I'm happy to speak frankly about it because that is just the fact of what happened.
Gaslighter, big timer.
Dutton's comments only adding to claims of party divisions. The Defence Minister brushing off suggestions he's circling the leadership.
I mean, it's obviously been a train wreck of a week for Scott Morrison. I mean, it's been a fantastic week for Peter.
Doing anything to get your ass farther.
Every time you have gone to the dispatch box, the only thing Scott Morrison can hear is the music from Jaws.
Oh, give me a break.
But while there may be blood in the water, anyone counting the PM out would be wise to remember we've been here before. Morrison suffered a similarly humiliating loss on the Medivac bill just before he won the last election.
Is this a no-confidence motion in the government?
No, of course it isn't.
So, while it's no doubt been a bruising week for the PM and his party, perhaps Albo shouldn't count his chickens just yet.
Guardian political reporter Amy Remeikis is here to give us her insights into the political week that was. Amy, the PM famously loves the fight of the campaign. Is it too early to count him out?
I think the Prime Minister definitely loves a fight, but he doesn't love Parliament. I think that's pretty clear. But that doesn't mean that we do need to count him out for the election. There is still quite a few weeks to go. And as we all know, he does have a way of pulling miracles out of the hat. So he seems to think that he can still do it. It's his party that is beginning to feel a little bit wobbly about it.
On that note, Amy, why is Peter Dutton accusing a bunch of his colleagues of lying?
It's nothing like a nice dose of undermining in the morning, is there? So I think Peter Dutton was just making the point that the Prime Minister may have lost control of part of his party room, and that wouldn't have anything to do with the fact that Peter Dutton is being floated as a leader, a potential leader for the Liberal Party. I can't imagine why he would start talking like that. So I think he's just slipping in a few little digs where he can.
Amy, those MPs who crossed the floor were all pretty clear on their position. Isn't this just A-grade gaslighting?
Yeah, I don't think anyone was surprised to see those 5 Liberal MPs cross the floor because they pretty much put it up in lights that that's what they were going to do. And it's not just because they feel personally about it, it's because their electorates feel personally about it. So it was a way of signalling to the electorate that they heard their concerns and were going to follow through with it. And the government knew that.
Amy, maybe this is being too cynical about the whole thing, but is this as bad for the government as it looks? These 5 MPs that crossed the floor, they're all facing really tough contests this election. A lot of them are from pretty moderate Liberal-held seats, up against independents in some cases. Doesn't this enable those MPs like Katie Allen, Dave Sharma, to say to their voters, hey, we don't always vote with Barnaby Joyce. You know, we do think for ourselves and we do represent you. And at the same time, Scott Morrison and the government as a whole can say, look, we did fight for those religious minorities. Doesn't this actually work for the government electorally?
It is a bit of a win-win, but for everyone, and including Labor in this. I think it's really the press gallery and journalists that get excited about the sort of week that we just saw in Parliament, whereas the electorate tends to look at the 3 years as a whole when they're making their votes. I don't think it's going to have too much impact, but I think the issue is that we're beginning to see compounding problems for the government, and it's beginning to look like Scott Morrison has lost control of his agenda. And the government is having a lot of trouble passing any legislation that it doesn't have bipartisan agreement with at the moment. That's the issue for the government, not necessarily what happened this week, but the fact that it's a bad week in a long line of bad weeks.
But if you're one of those MPs like Trent Zimmerman or Fiona Martin, you finish this week feeling a bit more comfortable, don't you? Because you know you can say to your electorate, look, I did stand up, I didn't always vote with the government.
Absolutely. And I think that those MPs will be going back to their electorates and saying, did you see what I did? I didn't just vote with the government because I heard your concerns. And that is going to count for their electorates because they are under quite a lot of threats from independents, from Labors, from Green MPs that are demanding more action. But a lot of the issues for those same MPs, though, is what is the government doing on climate change? So this is something in their favour, but they've still got a long hill to climb.
All right, another not boring week in Canberra. Amy, thanks for joining us.
I'm going to go have a very long lay down now.
We probably all need that. Yeah. I know we were talking there about Peter Dutton gaslighting, but I've got to say, if you are gay or trans or any of the letters of the alphabet that are reflected, you're pretty sick of getting gaslit by this Prime Minister. He said this week that he honestly thought this bill would unite people and would unite the Parliament. I mean, give me a break. We remember how Scott Morrison voted on same-sex marriage. We remember your position on it. We remember that this religious discrimination bill came out as a response to equal marriage rights in Australia. That's the origins of this. And standing in Parliament and saying that you reckon this was going to unite people, then you weren't listening. Because trans people, the gay community, were telling everyone that would listen for the duration of this argument, that this was harmful, that this would damage people, that this would add to the difficulties faced by young trans teenagers who have some of the worst suicide rates in our community. It's unthinkable that we would do this to young people. And the Prime Minister stands up in Parliament and says, I honestly thought this would unite people. Give me a break. Stop the gaslighting. Be honest about what you're doing. And I think, whatever the politics of it, those parliamentarians that stood up and against their own party and stood up for fairness and recognising young people and protecting their rights, I think they ought to be praised, whatever the politics of it is, because they did something very important. And, I had the opportunity to talk to young trans people this week about their fears. And, Dave Sharma, Katie Allen, Fiona Martin, Bridget Archer, I think I'm forgetting someone, Trent Zimmerman. They all did something for those young people. And whatever difficulty they face in the party room or from their colleagues, calling them liars on national radio this morning, all of those politicians will go to bed tonight knowing that they've made life at school a bit easier for trans kids.
And hopefully those kids have realised that they are being heard and how they live their lives is their business and politicians don't have any right to have a say in it at all.